am an older woman from the city of Hudson, Columbia County, standing here on behalf of many elected officials who are here today to call upon Governor Cuomo to sign a bill that would create the nation's first Commission on Prosecutor Conduct. Addressing prosecutorial accountability as it relates to statutory and ethical disclosure obligations is a reform whose time has come. According to the National Registry of Exonerations, New York has had 250 exonerations and 86, that's more than 1/3 involved, of prosecutorial misconduct. Put simply, the existing framework in New York to address prosecutorial misconduct has proven time and again to be insufficient, inefficient, and simply unjust. I would like to begin by reading a short statement to the governor by more than 100 signatures, including New York's wrongfully prosecuted, convicted numerous local, state, national, and even international groups, including It Can Happen to You, the New York State Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, the Innocent Project, the National Action Network, Robert F. Kennedy, Human Rights Watch, the Legal Aid Society, and so many more. It is now an honor to acknowledge Senator John DeFrancisco, a Senate sponsor of this historic legislation, and introduce also Assemblyman Nick Perry, the Assembly sponsor who has instrumental to the bill's passage and championed this issue for years. I would like to introduce to you now Assemblyman Nick Perry.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Good morning. Good morning. I am delighted to be here. I am humbled by the privilege and responsibility thrust on me, the opportunity to be the sponsor of this landmark legislation that will put New York State at the top of leadership as a progressive state where we do the right thing, where we are not just tired of the spurt of wrongful convictions, which is a big scar on our criminal justice system. The fact that we have an opportunity right now sitting on the governor's desk, a great opportunity to jump to the top of the line of leaders in criminal justice reform. I know that there are lots of people who are critical of this bill, but anybody who is convinced about the truth and about doing the right thing, stand with us. So I want to thank the great coalition of criminal reform advocates. I want to thank Bill Bastig and It Could Happen to You, bringing it before our face, the reality that it could really happen to you, because wrongful conviction happens mostly to minorities, African Americans and Latinos, but doesn't respect anyone or their position. All you need is a DA with all that power in that office who is not concerned about truth and about justice and about fairness in the system. All you need is a DA that's concerned only simply about racking up his record of convictions and another notch in his gun belt. That's all you need, and you could be a victim. And in addition to victims of wrongful convictions, there are a tremendous unnoticed number of victims of wrongful prosecution, where these victims have no opportunity to get compensation and are sometimes forced to spend their life's savings just to keep out of going to jail. And we talk a lot about the wrongful convictions, and New York is tarnished severely with that ugly scar of being one of the states where it happens too often. And so I call on the governor, as I have since we introduced this law, and I ask for his support. The governor has expressed, for as many times as I have raised this issue with him, he has said, I'm with you. So I expect that he will be showing that with the pen, and I will be terribly disappointed. And I'm sure all New Yorkers who consider themselves champions of justice will be terribly shocked and surprised if the governor did not find a way to sign this bill into law. We're counting on his leadership. Governor has proposed and championed criminal justice reform. This is one he should stand with us all the way and be a leader and ink that law, sign that law, that bill into law expeditiously. He doesn't have to wait until the 10 days is over. We are anxious. On this train for justice, let me call on all of you champions of justice to keep the fire burning and the light on and shine it on every dark place where there is injustice and unfairness, because every American who gets involved in the criminal justice system should be able to stand before a court of justice and to go through a process that we feel assured is fair and transparent, and the enormously powerful office of the prosecutor, which has gone through over 200 years of our democracy with no mechanism for checks and balance, not one that works. New York is going to be the state that leads the way. And I want to thank you in advance, Governor Cuomo, for signing this bill. Thank you. I have been asked to introduce my colleague who stands as a champion for justice, Assemblyman Dan Quam.
Good morning. First, let me thank Assemblymember Perry, who sponsored this bill, defended this bill on the floor of the Assembly, and shepherded it through a difficult legislative session to bring this to the governor's desk. Assemblymember Perry deserves all of our thanks for his incredible effort on this bill, so thank you, Nick. Secondly, and as importantly, or maybe more importantly, thank you to all the incredible advocates behind me, those who have suffered in real terms from wrongful conviction, who will come up after me and attest to how terrible this system can be and how little transparency and oversight there is, and how they were convicted on such flimsy evidence and how hard they had to not just overturn their conviction, but to regain their footing in life. On the substance of this legislation, it is beyond any reasonable doubt that the governor should sign this legislation. One only need to look what happened in upstate New York in this past year in Rensselaer County to see firsthand the limitations of existing executive law. A former district attorney in Rensselaer County who's alleged to have committed serious malfeasance, obstruction of justice, but even he, thus far, is immune from indictment or prosecution, is essentially answerable to no one, having conducted alleged terrible acts. And yet our current law is not sufficient enough to hold a person like that accountable. That in and of itself is the greatest argument for why this bill is necessary. The current law is deficient and is not responsible and cannot handle the glut of wrongful convictions. And yes, it is a glut, 250 to 260 wrongful convictions, about 130 or so from malfeasance of district attorneys throughout the state of New York. Some of the arguments against holding district attorneys accountable through an independent commission are that we ought to just change the discovery laws. That if there were greater discovery, that would dissipate the need for a commission like this. But it's interesting or ironic or hypocritical to note who is the greatest entity that has stopped discovery reform in Albany in this state for years. It's the District Attorneys Association. They have stopped all efforts at open file discovery in criminal cases. So for district attorneys or their supporters to argue that if we just reformed our discovery laws, a commission like this would be unnecessary is the height of hypocrisy. Secondly, Brady violations, subjective standards of what is and what is not exculpatory. We continue to rely on the federal Brady standard, unfortunately, here in New York at the district attorney's own discretion of what is and what is not exculpatory. It's wrong. It needs oversight, and this bill does it. The governor has a couple days left. I echo Assemblymember Perry's point. There is no need to wait. There are poor people in criminal court, mostly black and brown men, who will continue to be convicted if we do not have a bill of this nature. I hope the governor signs it immediately.
It is now my honor to introduce to you Senator Bailey.
Thank you very much. I will be as brief as an attorney and legislator could possibly be. I want to thank Bill. I want to thank the coalition. I want to thank Assemblyman Perry for being a champion for this legislation and for championing in the caucus during his term as our leader. I want to thank Assemblymember Court for his wise words today and throughout this legislative session. This is my first term. And in my first term, I found that certain things just don't make common sense in New York State. I stand outside of a courthouse, and I used to practice civil law. And as Assemblymember Court mentioned about discovery laws, I'm the sponsor of 2 discovery bills in the state Senate that would lead to open file discovery. And it's incredible if you go inside that building and if you're practicing on a civil matter, what you're entitled to. The things that you can get on behalf of your client. But if life and liberty is on the line, you don't get those same things. So I think about discovery, and I think about the problems that we have with discoverable evidence and the definition of exculpatory and everything that Assemblymember Court so rightfully said. And I think about this bill. And I think about why this bill needs to be in place. And I think about all of our laws and why they need to be in place. You see, laws aren't drafted for 95 to 99% of the people in society. This law is not being drafted for 95 to 99% of the DAs. It's not for them. The majority of them do their job. But when you don't do your job, just like anybody else in any other profession, you have to be held accountable. That is all we are asking today. We're not asking for special treatment. We're not asking for any differentiation. We just want, if you have done something that requires that you be penalized, that we have a venue and vehicle for you to do so. There's no mandatory penalties for all DAs. There's no, as soon as every case is filed, the district attorneys have to report to this tribunal. This is about fairness. And our criminal justice system is supposed to be predicated upon the notion of fairness. But time and time again, in this situation and many others, we see that it's not. I believe that we can take another large step in this state, the Empire State, a state that prides itself on being #1 in so many things. We can take a large step today in correcting so many wrongs in the past. You see, criminal justice reform is not some magic bullet theory that ends with raise the age or discovery or speedy trial or bail reform. It is the totality of these very circumstances that will bring us to a whole. And so we've raised the age. Now I ask that Governor Cuomo, you sign this bill into law so that we can have accountability. Thank you all.
It is now my honor to introduce a number of courageous men who were wrongfully convicted here in the Empire State, who will share with you the human face of wrongful prosecution. I would like to introduce Bill Bastic.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tiffany. And Tiffany is an assemblywoman of the city of Hudson, New York. Alderwoman. Okay. Alderwoman. She's been walking the halls on crutches the last couple of months, so that's how much this means to Alderwoman Garriga, and that's why we've asked her to MC this event today. 10 years ago, in 2008, August of 2008, I was wrongfully indicted for raping a 16-year-old girl in a shed at the Rochester Yacht Club. It took me 1 year to get to court. The reason it took me a year to get to court was because my attorney, my defense attorney, had to repeatedly issue notices of demand for Brady material that the prosecutor was intentionally withholding and that she didn't think was relevant. This material included diary entries in which she predicted the date and the time of the alleged incident. It included a diary entry in which she said, "I wish I could make this all go away." In addition to that, there were serious medical records. One day in court, my attorney told me during a break, he said, "Bill, you know what they're doing to you could happen to anybody." I was acquitted in May of 2009, and my wife and I are still paying off the $150,000 on the second mortgage that we had to borrow. I got lucky, and some of the men that you're going to hear from today were not so lucky. I now want to introduce H. Bosch Jr., who was wrongfully prosecuted for arson in Albany, New York.
Thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your busy day to show up. Great day for ducks, right? But you don't see them outside. First of all, I want to say this. There are good cops. There are good prosecutors. There are good law enforcement officials, okay? This bill is not about beating up on them. This bill is to point out the bad ones, so we can continue to acknowledge the thousands and thousands of good law enforcement officials that strap up and do their job every day. Now, briefly, as Bill just said, I was arrested and charged for arson in 2005, facing 35 years in prison, 4 felony counts. At the time, I was the owner of H. Bosch Moving and Storage in upstate New York. It was the largest minority-owned moving company in upstate New York. I was making $500,000 a year. Now, I'm going to allude real quick to Assemblyman Nick Perry. As he said, those of us who have been wrongfully prosecuted, our life still changes, because I lost everything. Because after 2 years, and as Assemblyman Perry alluded to, spending upwards of $200,000 in my life savings, thank God, after a 4-week trial, I was acquitted. But it still changed the trajectory of my life. But it led me into making a difference. I didn't ball up, lay down, and cry. I said, nope, I'm going to turn a setback into a setup for a comeback. And that's how I got introduced to Bill. And I continue to fight and advocate, all right, for the wrongfully accused, the wrongfully convicted, because something should be done. And I applaud Assemblyman Nick Perry, because New York State will be the first of its kind. This is groundbreaking legislation, and I hope every other state in the union follows. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. God bless you and continued success. Okay, I have the pleasure of introducing my good friend. In so many ways, he has helped me, and in a lot of ways has given me my voice in this community. Jeff Deskovi, all right, of the Jeff Deskovi Foundation for Justice. Come on up here, young man. Hang on that road, young man.
My name's Jeffrey Deskovi, and I spent 16 years in prison for a murder and rape which I did not commit. I was 16 when I was arrested. I was 17 when I was convicted. I was inside from 17 to 32. My case happened in Westchester County. I was exonerated 12 years ago through DNA testing, which not only established my innocence, but it also identified the actual perpetrator, who was subsequently arrested and convicted. Super briefly, the prosecutor in my case, he withheld critical information that the medical examiner who had committed fraud in my case had been complained of in neighboring counties by law enforcement officials for giving untruthful testimony. I was blocked several times from getting further DNA testing, and one day before officially getting DNA test results from the FBI lab, the prosecutor rushed to the grand jury to indict me, which prevented him from having to introduce that evidence to the grand jury. Ultimately, I was exonerated through further testing via the DNA data bank, which identified the actual perpetrator. By signing the legislation that we're talking about today, Governor Cuomo can send a message to the wrongfully convicted and exonerated that what happened to you is unacceptable, and we're going to do everything in our power to prevent this from happening to someone else. Us exonerees, we need to know that our suffering, the suffering of our family, counts for something. And this legislation will go a long way towards preventing other wrongful convictions caused by prosecutorial misconduct. So at least, though we suffered the loss, in my case, of 16 years and many more years than that, which the gentleman who come after me will articulate, at least we can take a little bit of heart that it did result into a better system, some change. Governor Cuomo, please sign this critical piece of legislation. Thank you. I would like to introduce now next exoneree, who, by the way, had a similar bad actor in his case as well. I'd like to introduce Anthony DePippo.
Thank you. My name is Anthony DePippo, as Jeff just said. I was 20 years wrongfully convicted for the rape and murder of a young girl. I had 3 trials. I was wrongfully prosecuted 3 times. October 11th, 2016, I was exonerated. What happened in my case was the true perpetrator had confessed, and while I was incarcerated, he was free to remain at large. And during that time he was free to remain at large, he assaulted other women and children. Right now he's serving 30 years. His name is Howard Gomberg. He is in the state of Connecticut, and he did a similar act to an 8-year-old girl. This bill's importance would deter the small few prosecutors, but as you can see, consequences are terrible. Prosecutors from, sorry, I'm a little nervous. This is the first time I really did this. It would deter prosecutors from, committing, Brady violations and using false evidence and perjured testimony. And also, another important fact, and I'm going to leave this mic, is not only is the exonerees or the wrongfully prosecuted or wrongfully accused victimized, so is the family who does not receive true justice. And in addition, 1 year, New York paid upwards to $200 million in compensation. And that is a victimization of the taxpayers. And that is a very critical point. And also to house the wrongfully convicted or the wrongfully accused is $65,000 a year, not including medical expenses or anything like that. But when I came home, I'm going to say this, I was home 4 days when I joined this movement. And no, Bill knows I'm good. I'm nervous in front of a crowd. But I walked these halls for 2 years. Countless people like Assemblyman, right, Perry, and DeFrancisco, and lobbying and doing my best job because I'm a victim. We're victims, but we're also survivors. And with that, I'm going to pass the mic.
I want to introduce next exoneree, Derek Hamilton.
Good morning, everybody. I want to thank everyone who has came out to support the bill. I want to give special thanks to Jeffrey Deskovi. I want to give special thanks to the Innocence Project, who have been at the forefront on policy reform, Bill Bassick, and all you great people who have stood by us. I would like to tell you, my name is, again, Derek Hamilton. I spent 21 years in prison for a murder that I did not commit. The prosecutor who convicted me sits as a senior person still in Kings County. I know of 3 people who she's wrongly convicted as well as me. She still gets a paycheck. I would like to say that candor to the courts and fairness to the accused is the oath that prosecutors take when they take office. But yet there's nobody that can hold them accountable to that oath. This bill will hold them accountable. Prosecutors, every day, I'm a paralegal, I work on cases. Every single day they lie. Every single day they cheat. Every single day they do things to get the advantage against the accused. This should not happen in a system that's supposed to be fair and transparent. Let's talk about Brooklyn, who exonerated, I believe, 25 people in the last few years. People applaud that and says, that's a good deed. I think it's terrible. The fact that Kings County convicted 25 innocent people, then went back years later and said, we did wrong, and we're exonerating them now. Yet not one prosecutor has been held accountable. I don't applaud that conduct. When people commit crimes, whether they're prosecutors, whether they're cops, they're human beings. They should go to jail. They should be prosecuted. I remember going to the Innocence Project at Dover School of Law when I first came home from prison. There was a symposium on prosecutor misconduct. And there was a great panel of judges and prosecutors and lawyers. And they said that prosecutor misconduct is not egregious. And I wrote a note. I said, if you were sitting in that defendant's chair and a prosecutor did something that sent you to prison, would it not be egregious to you and your family? John Thompson said something. He was a guy that was convicted, I believe, in Louisiana or New Orleans somewhere. He sat on that panel. And when it got to him, he said something that stood with me for the rest of my life. He said, the prosecutor in my case tried to kill me. I was on death row. That prosecutor should be charged with murder. That stood with me. Today we ask Governor Cuomo not to do us a favor. We beg you to pass a law that's about human decency, that's about protecting people, everybody, not just people that was wrongfully convicted, human beings, people that's right now in court that's being charged wrongfully, but the prosecutor only cares about a conviction. They want to win. This is not a sporting game. This is people's lives. This is people that's affected every single day. The fact that we gather here today in harmony and asking the governor to pass this bill, right? It's not because we want to, because we know there's on the right side of justice. Governor Cuomo, we believe in you. We trust you. We want you to be our governor forever. But we want you to pass a bill that makes sense. Not a bill that just is for the purpose of signing it, but will affect people's lives. All Americans in New York deserve a fair chance. And we thank y'all all for coming. And let's pass this bill. Governor Cuomo, sign this bill.
Would like to call up now Keon Katibi, another exoneree, who, by the way, is a lawyer.
How you doing? My name is Keon. I'm the principal attorney in the law office of Keon D. Katibi P. LLC, located right here in New York. I also come appear before you today as Keon Katibi, the exoneree, having been wrongfully incarcerated in New York State for about 10 years, basically my entire 20s. Part of the misconduct that prosecutor committed at my trial was withholding the fact or any records that indicated the star witness was on probation for a felony of grand larceny while he was cooperating with the police and the prosecution and while he testified at my trial. Now, I'm not going to stand here and give you a whole legal spiel, but I can tell you it's legal ethics 101 that the prosecutor had to disclose that at my trial, and I can stand here and tell you if that happened, I do not believe I would have spent 10 years wrongfully incarcerated. Now, I understand a lot of intelligent people worked hard on this bill to get it passed. And I also understand that it passed the legislature with large bipartisan support. And so I'm here today to support this bill, and I believe it's incumbent on Governor Cuomo, and I ask you to be a champion of justice and sign this bill into law. It is the right time for New York State, it is the will of the people, and it is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Johnny Capier. I am the host of a brand new podcast show called Los Inocentes that interviews Latino exonerees throughout the country. I'm an actor, I'm an activist, and I am also an exoneree that spent a travesty of 25 years in prison for a crime that I did not commit. If I was to campaign to run for district attorney, state congressman, attorney general, or the governor of New York by stating to everyone here that I'm in full support of signing this bill, I'm sure that many individuals would support me and possibly even vote me into that position. Good news, I'm not running or campaigning for any of those positions. But I do believe that as a New Yorker, over 85% of New Yorkers support Governor Cuomo. I like Governor Cuomo. He has supported in improving the educational system here in New York. He has supported the installment of videotaping interrogations. I even remember him when he came into Sing Sing Correctional Facility and greeted me and my graduate class. But there's a problem. Individuals that disregard the law, individuals that think that they are above the law, and yet intentionally convict innocent individuals, because that is a misnomer. There's no such thing as a wrongful conviction when you deny testing DNA, when you know there has been a wrongful conviction, and when you know that there has been many individuals that has guided and influenced misidentification. That is an intentional conviction. So as a New Yorker, I would be honored to stand by Governor Cuomo if he was to sign this bill, and I implore him to do so. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out here today to this Stand Together event. Governor Cuomo, I hope you heard these voices loud and clear today. Not one single piece of criminal justice or ethics reform legislation was adopted by the legislature this year, with the exception of this piece of legislation. The organizations that signed on this bill are not your typical criminal justice reform organizations. It includes New York State United Teachers, the Hotel Union, New York State Catholic Conference, as well as national organizations such as the Human Rights Watch, the RFK Center for Human Rights, the Black Trade Unionist Association, and dozens of other community organizations and community leaders from every sector of the state, including local city councils from Rochester, Yonkers, City of Hudson, Syracuse, Albany, New York. You're hearing from everybody. Governor, the only people in the world that oppose this bill are those that it's going to hold accountable, the prosecutors. Please sign this bill immediately. Thank you.
The time has come, New York. How many wrongful prosecutions and how many wrongful convictions can New York sustain before we say it is enough? We will wait no longer and call on the governor to make sure this bill, at long last, becomes law. I would like to ask if there's any questions from the press.
I think they all get it.
Yes. Well, we urge all of you to call Governor Cuomo's office. Let him know that you support this bill. Let him know to sign this into law and that we want this now. It is well overdue. Thank you all for coming out, and please continue to support. We have a question. August 20th is the deadline for Governor Cuomo to sign the bill.
Under the Constitution, the governor had until August 20th to sign the bill. If he does nothing, the bill automatically becomes law. But he can sign it now. He has an option also to veto it. That is what we would find unacceptable, and we don't expect our great governor to do that.
Any other questions? Okay, like I said, continue to support criminal justice reform. Call Governor Cuomo to support this bill. Thank you all for coming.